every system fails.
Mhm.
And that's the thing you also want to understand. It's like the minute you marry yourself to a system, you have just capped your capabilities. Good morning. Happy Monday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand, and it is perfect. Okay. Huge, gigantic week coming up. So it is birthday week. We got a big show on Thursday, big party. I got people coming in from all over the place, from out of town. We're gonna have a big crowd staying here at Casa de Hartman. So I'm really looking forward to that. But we will continue with our process, and we will have today's Q&A. And today's Q&A is with Vic, and Vic is actually going to be an attendee to the Intensive XII. And so I also talked to Vic a little bit on IFAST University, and we've talked to him before a little bit. But Vic came back with a really cool question, a little bit different than what we typically talk about, but it's more towards the mentorship side of things, and I think you'll find it valuable because we covered when to even seek out assistance or a mentor. Let me see, we got a couple notes here. Negative influences of belief systems. Systems are potentially useful, but all systems will eventually fail. So you got to keep that in mind. How to formulate a question using analogy to learn new information. The limitations of explicit information versus the tacit knowledge. That's a huge one, because I think people think that just because they can regurgitate information, they actually know something, and then they're providing value, when actually there's zero value when everybody has access to the same information. So I hope you will find this useful. If you're interested in participating in a 15-minute consultation, please go to askbillhartman@gmail.com, askbillhartman@gmail.com, put 15-minute consult in the subject line, and we'll arrange that at our mutual convenience. Don't forget, all these videos are up on the YouTube channel, so go to the YouTube channel and subscribe, please. Make use of that. Everybody have a terrific Monday, and we will see you tomorrow. We are recording and clock has started. Vic, what is your question?
So my question kind of is in the same vein as our last talk, where we kind of talked about the value of mentorship and when that may be maximized and when to seek, so other avenues. And so thinking about that same process, my question was, when you're trying to learn something, and we talked about the value of struggle, what's a system in place or a heuristic you use to say, okay, this is the time value is greater than what I'm putting in, or maybe what I'm getting out of that learning process, and maybe it's time to seek out help or seek expertise from somewhere else. Because I don't know, it was within the past year, I know you had posted something where you were asking someone for help regarding like quantum physics or something like that, and you saw it. And so I was like, okay, what made you decide that process, and what kind of goes into your thought process with that question of when to seek help, outside help?
So when to seek help is actually kind of an easy one, because at some point in time, you're not going to be able to answer the questions all by yourself. It's important, though, that you make the attempt first, because in many cases, and because of the prolific nature of information and the instantaneous access, a lot of these questions can be answered in some way, shape, or form, because again, like I said, information is essentially free, everything is available. What you run into, though, is because you may not have the vocabulary, so to speak, to understand everything, that you might need some expertise in someone that can explain it to you in some language that you may be familiar with. And so that's when I seek. So I have a friend that like, he's got a background in astrophysics, so that's great. I just like, hey, I got a question, and he's like, oh, and then he dumbs it down for me. So we talk about, like, when we talk about curved space time and things like that, he uses free throws as an example, which is like this brilliant analogy. It's important that you do establish your own understanding first, so you have a comparison, so you're not flying in in blindly, because we tend to learn things by analogy. And so if I can acquire new information or a different understanding, I because of the effort that I put in beforehand, I have that comparator. And so now I can say, okay, so here's where I was, here's the distance that we had to cover. This is the actual representation. Now I can see where it comes from, or it just gets me further towards some way that I can understand something that might even be a little beyond my grasp. So the struggle is important, like I said, because number one, there's got to be an emotional attachment to anything that you learn. Otherwise, you won't retain it. It's sort of like when you were in school and they club you over the head with gross anatomy and physiology, and they say, okay, just spit this back out on the test, and you do pretty well, and then it's like you go out into clinicals, and then you have a CI that goes, oh, well, where's the tibialis posterior attached? And you're going to go, well, it's kind of in this area, and it kind of does this, because it just wasn't meaningful to you when you were first exposed to that. And it was basically, like I said, just spit it on the test. Whereas now, through the discussions that we've had and the interactions on IFAST U and all of the calls and things, and now you start to see, oh, when you do these things in context, it's a totally different representation. You make it more meaningful, and then the retention is just that much easier, because now it's like, like I said, there's an emotional attachment to it. It's like you have a reason for retaining that information. As far as deciding on when to move on, that's always an interesting question, because I think that there's definitely two perspectives. So you've got the mentor and the mentee that both influence the relationship. And there's points in time where the mentor has a pretty clear perspective that, okay, it's time for you to, leave the nest and move on and go seek something else. Like they understand, it's like, I have topped out. I've given you everything that I can. It's now up to you to evolve this. And then there's also the mentee's perspective that says, I've had my fill and I want to do something else. And so I don't think there's one way ever to do this. And then I think that that's a discussion that you have too, because there's been a lot of bad representations in history of mentor and mentee relationships, where it eventually turns into butting heads. At that point, I think that it's pretty clear that it's probably time for somebody to move on, because you never want it to degenerate into that kind of a situation. That there's no reason for it, because the whole premise of that relationship in the first place was for both people to get better, right? And if it turns into a conflict like that, that doesn't make sense to me. Like the mentor should never be insulted when the mentee moves on. It's like, okay, that's entirely up to you. And then the mentee shouldn't be hurt when the mentor says it's time for you to go. Right? Because again, there's emotional investment on both sides. So I understand being human and the emotions involved in it, but there should also be the understanding, like, this is not a forever relationship. This is not a husband and a wife situation, right? It is when we reach a point where we feel like we're in the land of diminishing returns, then it's probably time for us to seek other information, because the more filters you have, the better you're going to be. Because again, most people, they get stuck in a system and the system fails. Every system fails. And that's the thing you also want to understand. It's like the minute you marry yourself to a system, you have just capped your capabilities, and you don't ever want to do that. You don't ever want to keep growing.
Yeah, and that's kind of the crux of my question, was that, like, when do you, like, say for example the anatomy, and that's kind of where this was born from, where, okay, I'm trying to, you said formulate a question and then try to answer that question. So
Absolutely.
Obviously you've gone through this process, and when were you, I'm trying to figure out, okay, keeps running. Each time that I try to answer this question, I learn more and more and more. And it seems like there's not really any point where I say, okay, let me pull back, because maybe my foundation is not there yet to kind of build and say, or my question isn't specific enough that it's broad, and I'm building that.
Right.
And so when you were kind of coming up with your model, and you were posing these questions to yourself and answering, when did you say, okay, let me, even if it's like a book, or maybe I'm going to go to Google and try to get, or when do I, for my example, when do I ask Bill and say, is this the right one? Or, is this the iteration that we're looking for? Mm-hmm. Or do I just keep kind of, chipping away at answering that question because there's value in that. So I'm trying to figure out, spending 45 minutes to an hour, on one question is that, and when you ran into that, what did you do? Did you just keep going, or, you said Google and then kind of,
right.
Make a cut from there and kind of go, you're still in the same path, but maybe, different trajectory?
Well, so let's go back to the beginning of this portion of the question. Is, okay, did you ask the right question? And so, number one, you accumulate information, you try to capture an understanding, and then you apply. So this is one of the mistakes that people make, is they think that the answer is strictly in the information. Because I think people say, where can I get a book on understanding more about compression and expansion? It's like, well, hey, pick up a physics book first and understand what it really means. And then you got to go anatomy, and you got to say, well, what are the constraints, et cetera, et cetera. And then you got to either go into the gym, or you go into the clinic, or whatever your environment is, and you start to apply it, because that's where the true question is going to be answered, because that's real life. And now you have a situation where the things that cannot be expressed in a textbook or on a video or in a blog or whatever it is, that's the experiential element that is essential, especially for what we do when you're interacting with other humans, because it's unpredictable, it's complex, and you don't know what the answers are going to be. And so what the experience then does, as you apply it and you go, ooh, that didn't work, and the information that I've accumulated says that it's a possibility, but now I know what the other possibilities are. And so this is what we call the tacit knowledge. So this is the stuff, if you've ever tried to explain something to someone that you feel like you've got a terrific grasp on it, but the words just don't make any sense when they come out of your mouth, that's the tacit. That's like, I have this understanding, I want to show you, or I want to teach you, but the only way that you can do this is to actually execute it, right? It's like, you could explain what a back squat is to someone, right, in great detail. And then they have to go try to execute it off of that. And it's a totally different world once you're under the bar, right? That's the things that you could not express. You couldn't say, here's what it feels like to have the bar on your back. Here's where your foot position is. And then as you descend, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. It's like, you can't tell anybody that. You have to experience that. But what the experience does, those are your safe to fail experiments. This is where you actually test your knowledge and test your understanding. And then you see what the possibilities are. And in many cases, this helps you formulate a better question. And now you can start the process all over. So it's this continuous loop of question, test, outcome. Okay, based on this, what is the next step? So you're always hopefully always refining and evolving your I can assure you. So I don't know if everybody knows this, but you're coming to the next intensive, and so I can assure you with great confidence that your intensive is going to be totally different than the previous 11, because there's different people in the room, and the model has evolved a great deal since the last one, because it's always changing, because everything is refined. Everybody thinks that there's one answer, and it's like, no, we just keep getting better, and we draw it through more filters, and we have a better process. And we've had another, so I've had another year of teaching, talking, answering questions. Why do you think I do this, Vic?
To get more data, get better questions, different questions, different perspectives.
It helps me every time. I could be asked the same question 6 different times, and because I'm talking to a different person, the answer is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
And again, that helps me. It helps everything in regards to modeling what is arguably something that we'll never fully understand.
Yeah, that's why I take the same approach on the IFAST page where I try to, put information out there and just kind of see
Yeah,
what discussion develops, because then you learn so much more. And
absolutely. Why do I answer questions with questions?
to
Right.
make people think. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's to
Find
make
answers.
to make it hard.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I
And
can tell you stuff. I can tell you stuff, and then you just go, eh. But if I challenge you to look from another perspective, or to, like I said, capture another piece of information, then it helps you, right?
yeah.
It's not about again, it's like just spitting out stuff on a piece of paper. Anybody can do that. Anybody can do that.
Yeah, and I think the key to what you said, that the perspective that brought it all together, was that just that application of the scientific process, instead of looking externally towards information in books, or just applying that and kind of using your own process to answer the question, as opposed to saying that maybe there's a definitive answer in a book that I can get to answer my exact question, whereas that might not be the case. And that's what I feel like
how can you have a definitive answer in a complex domain where multiple outcomes are possible? Right? So, and you've heard me talk about this before, where I talk about the probabilities of success.
Yeah.
Right. It could be 82 in favor of you and 18 against, and you land in the against because that was a possibility. It could be a 0.05% chance that something's going to happen, and it does. Right? Because it's still possible. And that's a bitter pill for people to swallow, because in school, they gave you yes, no answers. And it was very black and white. This is this is that, right? Because it's uncomfortable to think that, if your instructor was saying in front of the class, go, by the way, you're never really going to know what's going to happen until it does. And then all of a sudden, ooh,
Or the multiple muscles. That's what I was like, I've just, but I've studied, and like you said, within the context, just because the emotional attachment and the desire to learn, I've studied, or I've kind of retained a lot more of the anatomy than I ever did kind of in PT school, because it was just that regurgitation here, memorize this and then apply.
But you're applying it in context, and that's what makes it meaningful. You're seeking it out this time, instead of being said, here's what I want you to know.
Yeah, I'm answering a question with that, trying to answer a question with that.
Yeah, that's why I don't lecture. I talk, but I don't lecture, because that of what value is it? It's like I'm standing up in front of somebody and saying, this is what you need to know. And everybody's sitting there go, oh, good, feed me. And it's like, one, it's not fun. It's not enjoyable at all. Right? It's much better to have a discussion and get everyone else's perspective, because it, like I said, it helps everybody under those circumstances, which is why you're going to get really, really uncomfortable in a very tiny room with a lot of people jammed into it.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah. All right, man. I got to
call. All right. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a great day.
All right. You too. Bye.